it's kind of a hack to the system where someone can get an NGO stood up for a fairly small amount of money. Like George Soros was really good at this. Like George Soros is like a system hacker. Like he figured out how to hack the system. He's a genius at arbitrage. These days he's pretty old, but a genius at arbitrage. So he figured out that you could leverage a small amount of money to create a nonprofit, then lobby the politicians to send a ton of money to that nonprofit, so you can take what might be, a $10 million donation to a nonprofit to create a nonprofit and leverage that into $1 billion NGO. A nonprofit is a weird word. It's just a non-governmental organization, and then the government continues to fund that every year, and it'll have a nice sounding name like the Institute for Peace or something like that. But really, it's a graft machine.
And what are the requirements with that money? What do they have to do?
Just really no requirements at all.
So they just get grants and the government just assumes that they're doing good work.
I think a lot of people in the government know that they're not doing good work. But it's a giant graft machine.
That was Elon Musk on a Joe Rogan podcast episode. Friends, every week on this show, one of the things I try to do is pull back the curtain on power. Not the kind of power that shows up on C-SPAN, but the kind that moves quietly in foundations, nonprofits, and tax-exempt organizations that really shape America without a single vote being cast. When you think about billions of dollars flowing through this world every year, and while many of these charities, they do great good work, a staggering number are little more than political machines in disguise. That's where today's guests come in. Scott Walter is one of the nation's leading watchdogs on dark money and influence. He's the president of the Capital Research Center, author of Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America, and he's testified before Congress, the Senate, and the IRS on nonprofit abuse. Before that, he served in the George W. Bush White House as special assistant to the president for domestic policy. And he's been quoted everywhere, from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal. Scott has spent his career mapping the hidden networks of power that most Americans never see. And right now, he's warning that what looks like charity has become a gravy train for left-wing megadonors. George Soros and his allies recently poured, let's check this out, $20 million into groups protesting President Trump's D.C. crackdown. At the same time, taxpayer dollars are flowing by the billions into nonprofits that sue, lobby, and protest against policies designed to restore law and order, which begs the question, are we, the taxpayers, funding our own opposition? And who's going to tell us that? Our good friend Scott. Scott, welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer.
Great to be with you. That's the best intro I've ever had.
Now, Scott, let's start really simple. For listeners who hear the phrase NGO gravy train and wonder what it means, can you explain how these nonprofits have turned tax-exempt status into a political weapon? And why does this matter for the average American who thinks their tax dollars are funding social good?
Well, sure. The bit you had there from Elon Musk on Joe Rogan's show, that's the gist of it, right? You can set up an NGO, non-governmental organization, and get the government, which is to say the taxpayer, to pour money into it in perpetuity. And there's example after example of groups like that. The most egregious is probably under the last administration. They created this huge green slush fund called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for $27 billion, right? Yeah. And there was one nonprofit that was just popped into existence.
I wonder where that's from.
Yeah, well, that one, as I said, Stacey Abrams, it was one of her nonprofits, right? They had $100 in their bank account when the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund said, how about $2 billion more?
Well, Scott, I don't understand. Now, I've been in the nonprofit world. I've built nonprofits. I just simply wouldn't take government money because there's so many dictates they have of how you can do, who you can serve. That's why I've stayed away from it. But where's the oversight of how this money is being spent? Is there a mechanism in place to provide oversight and it's just ignored?
Well, a couple of things. In theory, right, the IRS is supposed to be looking over nonprofits and seeing if they're, just enriching people and accomplishing nothing, or if they're doing politics, right, because they're not supposed to be mixed up in elections. But the IRS does virtually nothing whatsoever. And Congress, until very recently, has been asleep at the switch. Although I'm happy to say I've testified 3 times in the last couple of months or so to different committees that are starting to take a real interest in this.
Yeah, unless you're a center-right organization, because they have investigated a lot of the center-right organizations, correct?
Oh, well, of course, the most notorious scandal in decades happened back when Barack Obama was trying to get reelected in 2012, when Lois Lerner, who was the top nonprofit watchdog at the IRS, blocked hundreds of conservative groups from becoming nonprofit.
Now, there are some reports that says George Soros and his network, they pushed over $20 million into these groups protesting Trump's D.C. crime crackdown. What does this protest network reveal about the strategy of megadonors? And again, why should everyday Americans connect the dots between Soros money and rising crimes in their neighborhoods?
Well, that's very easy. Soros has always been funding for decades groups that exist just to rush into action to protest whatever it is this afternoon, right? I mean, It's not like he had to wake up and say, "Oh, we got to create groups to protest the ICE raids or something like that, or the crackdown on crime in D.C." No, you fund these groups so that anytime there's a controversy, for whatever reason, they can rush into the streets and pretend like there's this huge uprising, right? Like there are a lot of people in Ward 8 of D.C. where crime is horrific who want to stop police.
I don't get it. When you look at every time I see these protests, you see these Acme bricks that are out, these cinder blocks that are out, and all of this, people are being fed and bussed in. Why can't the federal government? Why hasn't there been like some type of RICO, the racketeering? Because as I look, there has to be collusion amongst these groups to cause all this chaos. Why can't we go after these people and create a true RICO charge?
Well, that's a great question, right? But as I said, nobody has been looking into any of this until you had Musk and Doge looking at the government funding of this, and until very recently when Congress is starting to wake up, people have just ignored it. And the groups always want to insist, like as you said, you pull the curtain back on these things, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the whole point. It's all Wizard of Oz stuff, right? They want you to think there's this huge uprising when, in fact, it's the same few thousand people around the country every time who are the nucleus of this, and then maybe some dumb college kids, who believe the nonsense and have an exciting day of screaming at cops.
Yeah. Now, you've testified before Congress and the IRS about nonprofit abuse. What, in your estimation, what are the biggest loopholes that let, how do I phrase this, that let political activism masquerade as charity? And why do you think, why does closing these loopholes matter for voters who feel like they're, because I talk to people all the time, and they just feel like their voices are drowned out by a lot of these billionaires, Soros-type people?
Well, on the last question first, this is the thing, right? The conservative side doesn't begin to have the permanent protester apparatus, infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
The ordinary, most people don't like crime.
Correct.
Right? But we don't have groups that rush into the streets when the crime rate goes up a little to go say, hey, what mayor and state police and the rest, why aren't you, and prosecutors, right? Remember, Soros pays for prosecutors who will let murderers and rapists out, too. So, but we don't have anybody out there organized for us. So that's the answer to the last part of the question. And then on the loophole stuff, the quote-unquote charities, the 501c3 groups that you get a tax deduction for giving money to, nobody is looking to see, hey, are you trying to get people elected? Hey, are you doing protests only against one side? There's just no real oversight of that.
Well, I had a friend that said we need to create this thing called a justice czar, where they look into these type of things, and even with the whole all of the Russiagate and all that, create a position in the White House called the justice czar. Do you think a position like that, and you give them just carte blanche to go out there and just find it? If it's a Republican, guess what? Put the cuffs on them. If it's a Democrat, put the cuffs on them. Do you think creating a justice czar is the right tool to go after a lot of the stuff that most politicians and even prosecutors just ignore?
Well, you're right. That is a tough question. I will say that the record of czars like that is not especially great in accomplishing the sort of thing you're trying to do there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the law could also be better, right? We could have the laws about what's going to constitute improper political activity. Congress could make the laws a little clearer and restrain these folks. But I'll tell you, what you're doing right now is important. The education part is critical. The Wizard of Oz, when the curtain gets pulled back and you see that the wizard is just some old guy at a microphone, well, his power over Dorothy evaporates, right?
Yeah.
So what you're doing in educating people about, don't believe that, this is not a bunch of your neighbors who all of a sudden think crime is great and police are bad.
Right.
That's not what's going on here. It's a handful of people pretending that they represent everybody.
If you're just joining the show, we're talking to Scott Walter. He's the author of Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. Now, you had a lot of hay made about USAID and basically the dismantling of it. How bad was it with USAID, and especially as it relates to the kickbacks or money finding its way back into politicians' hands?
The worst thing was that it was masking political agendas in other countries, right? And this especially was the case with the Soros network. He doesn't just have a bunch of nonprofits that he's got going here in America. He's got them all over the world. And USAID, over the years, was pouring millions of dollars into those nutty left-wing nonprofits. As I said, even like Macedonia, which is bizarre, right? How does somebody in America want to mess with Macedonia's politics? But by God, George does. So, and the USAID would pour money into that. It's also about sort of the uniparty in D.C., right? The establishment class that has its own interests against the rest of us, and it was pouring money into nonprofits that were largely employment agencies, right, for your cronies, from both parties in D.C.
Yeah. When you look at, the only person that I think that's ever really looked into Soros was Texas AG Ken Paxton. But you look at Elon Musk and other GOP donors, the Koch brothers, the Dick Ulines, the Adelsons. There's always some type of government investigation, or they're looking at where they're spending their money, who they're sending their money to. Why hasn't there been like this mass investigation on Soros and the people? I forget the billionaire who supplied all of the bricks in California, but why aren't they looked into more?
Well, as I said, I'm afraid that the kind of education you're doing now is just so badly needed, because it's only thank God for the Doge work and the rest. Folks on the conservative side are just beginning to wake up and make sense of this huge network that you're talking about. We've studied it for years, but we've been like a voice in the wilderness. On the left, as you say, there's tons of groups on the left that constantly study anything any conservative donor does, right?
Yeah.
And the left-wingers in Congress and in Democrat administrations, they understand this and chase it. But on the conservative side, there's just been very little.
The media, they often ignore or they even enable these funding networks. How does media complicity matter in a story like this? And what does it mean for citizens who rely on journalism to tell them the truth about where their tax dollars go? As you can see, I'm always concerned about why it matters to the average everyday American who's out there busting their butt and the government is forcefully taking money from their paycheck. It's always about the people. Why is the media ignoring this or enabling these funding networks?
Well, of course, this is the thing, right? The majority of the media are entirely on Soros's side. So they're not going to be exposing this the way that you are exposing it. Yeah. And but you're right. It's just crazy. Most people don't like crime. Most people think, voter ID is a good idea. Right? But the mainstream media treats you like you're some crazed Klansman if you're in favor of any of these things.
It's so funny you say that. This is off topic, but I just had an interview with an individual who went over to Cambodia. And Cambodia and Thailand, as you know, they're fighting. And on yesterday, Thailand, armed soldiers came in and tried to take over some more land. And the people pushed back. And I heard it. I didn't hear that story anywhere but from this Cambodian. I mean, I've gotten like 2 million views just on that story alone. And I got like 5,000 new followers, all from Cambodia. People are looking for people to protect them. Why isn't the American government protecting us from people like George Soros and his ilk?
Well, this is the thing, right? As I said on the Uniparty, there's way too many folks in both parties who are very comfortable with that kind of billionaire. And they are not sitting there worried about the poor grandma in a crime-ridden neighborhood in Detroit.
Wow. How big is Arabella's empire today?
Oh, billions and billions, right? So in 2020, the election cycle, so 2019 and 20, their nonprofits took in $2.4 billion. Wow. Way more than the two political parties' national groups combined. And now in the 22 cycle, right, that's the off year. That's not the huge 2020 Trump reelection fight. So surely that number went down, right?
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh.
Instead of being 2.4, it was $3 billion.
Wow. Who is Arabella? You hear a lot of talk about it, but who are they?
Well, this is a great. My book came out last year about them, and then just a few weeks ago we had the paperback come out. It's a big new and expanded edition with a lot more info. Yeah. And hilariously, one of the things that we discovered in that year is that Arabella was bought out. It's a for-profit company that runs nonprofits. The for-profit was bought out by a billionaire family in Chicago a few years ago. So it only proves my point all the more. This is government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, for the billionaires.
Wow. And to think some of these people are elected officials who have built a lot of their wealth through these networks, correct?
Well, you certainly can make a lot of money, and Arabella makes the for-profit side is taking in tens of millions a year in fees from the nonprofit.
Oh, yeah. And maybe consulting, and they're paying a lot of their friends for consulting fees too, correct?
You see that a lot, yes.
All right, Scott, final question. For listeners who've listened to this interview and it just frustrated them, who hear all this and they feel powerless, what is one concrete step they can take to either resist or expose the NGO gravy train in their own communities?
The best thing on that, I believe, is you should bookmark our website, influencewatch.org. Influencewatch.org. It's a Wikipedia of the left. It's thousands and thousands of entries on the donors, the foundations, the groups, and the rest. And I love it. I see people writing letters to the newspaper and things like that all over the country using what they learned at influencewatch.org.
Well, I just bookmarked it for my own reading pleasure, and I'm definitely going to go through that. Where can people get your book, Scott?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Okay. What about your own personal website? You have one of those?
For the think tank, it's capitalresearch.org. And we'll be happy to take your donation because we won't take a penny of government money either.
Because Scott, are you sometimes fearful of exposing? Because a lot of people say to me, John, are you afraid to do certain? Because I interviewed the exiled prime minister of East Turkestan, and I was told you probably don't want to do that. You don't want to get on China's radar. That doesn't. I have no fear as it relates to exposing a lot of this stuff. Are you ever concerned for your own safety?
Maybe I'm foolhardy, but I love the fight, and I think it's our duty to fight. That's the way America. There wouldn't be an America if people weren't willing to fight big, rich, powerful empires.
Amen. That's Scott Walter Foltz, author of Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. Go out and get the book, and also go follow influencewatch.org and bookmark it as I just did. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on Detroit's Morning Answer.
Always great to be with you.
You are the best. Yeah, that's. I mean, I've always just wanted to know, why haven't we been able to find a way to go after these people? It's just insane. It's just insane. It frustrates me that we can't find a way. That's why I'm telling you, this closing down of USAID, not so much closing it down, but just ensuring. Marco Rubio is doing one heck of a job as it relates to protecting taxpayer money. But I mean, you think about all these mega the billionaires. I mean, even Pritzker. Pritzker had NGOs. The governor of Illinois. Dude, this is how they've done a lot of work. This is how they've built. When people really don't understand the way a lot of these Democrats build these street teams and build all of these people to help them get elected, they've used NGOs. This is how it's happened. And again, another one of the left's sacred cows that President Trump is kicked over. You want to know why we love this man? This is the reason why I voted for all of this to happen. I didn't realize on the scale of it what would come of it, but this is why I voted for the man. And if I could, as I got my Trump 2028 hat on right now, I would again. Detroit's Morning Answer. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, I'm trolling. We'll be right back.